Where's Bagoo's house? Where are you, Bagoo? Bagoo, never mind. We'll get back to you later. Hey everyone, this is Jason from the Gaming Manual. I'm flying solo today, and this is the good, the bad, and the buggy. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Ah yes, The Legend of Zelda. That classic, golden cartridge has spent many an hour in my Nintendo growing up. I remember coming across Zelda 2 at my local Funko Land in my hometown of Peabody, Massachusetts. I also recall being more excited than anything that there was just a second Zelda game from the Nintendo. You have to remember, this was the mid-90s, guys. There was no YouTube videos, playthroughs, Let's Plays, or even emulators for the most part, so I always just thought that the first Zelda game was the only one for the Nintendo. You also have to remember that you didn't know what a game really looked like unless you saw gameplay pics in a magazine, you took a gamble while renting it, or someone was, nice enough to maybe let you borrow it. Well, I saw Zelda 2, and I took my risk that day, and I slammed down my whole $4.99 on that counter, and I never looked back. Now, I've since played and beaten this classic NES hard title many, many times since those days. Does it still hold up? Let's pop it in and check it out. The good. Now, I'm going to start right off the bat with something that I think is actually both underrated and overlooked in this game, the combat system. For all the mixed feelings that this game gets, I feel that the combat is one of the aspects which works out best in this game's favor. Everything is just so tight and responsive. Link controls beautifully. I was just telling Josh the other day that if you're getting decked in this game, it's because you lost your rhythm with the enemies coming at you. And that's what I think I enjoy most about Zelda 2's combat system. It's rhythm-based. It's like boxing. You have to time your offense and your defense based around what your opponent is doing. Sure, there's no shortage of areas and sections where you'll want to just, spam attack the crap out of everything, but when it comes to the more challenging enemies, you'll be forced to adopt an actual strategy. And you know what? That's something that I admire. The boss patterns, for the most part, are fun and unique, and they really ramp up the challenging in a fair manner. The action RPG elements. So the combat system we just discussed segues perfectly into this game's action RPG elements. Fans of more traditional RPG games, such as Final Fantasy, will be happy to see that the game features an experience point system, as well as random field battles with enemies and monsters. Once you bump into an enemy, the overworld screen will switch to a side-scrolling action screen, just like at the start of the game. Zelda 2 is going to challenge the player right out of the gate with sorting out all of the different ways to approach and deal with these enemies. Some are laugh-out-loud easy, others require some serious trial and error. But once you figure out how the combat system ties in with gaining that sweet, precious EXP, you'll feel right at home with Zelda 2. So, I gotta admit, I prefer the 2D action sequences the most in this game. Those overworld graphics here are certainly quite crude by today's standards, but they definitely get the job done. One of my favorite things about playing classic NES titles such as this is seeing all the little ways that the programmers and designers had to use the graphics and the RAM limitations to their advantage. Just to maximize those sweet, sweet 8 little bits. I will say though, I've always loved the graphics and the sound in this game. And that leads us right into music and sound. Well, who would have guessed it? Everything here is as crisp as you could expect it to be. I love the main theme. I love the overworld music. I love the palace music, and I of course love the Great Palace theme. I just absolutely adore the music and sound effects in Zelda 2. They just work. Bravo to the sound team here. The bad. The lives system. Oh boy. For all the good that this game introduced before, it certainly starts to tie its own shoes together right about here. So the problem with the live system isn't so much that you have an arbitrary, limited amount of attempts at completing the game. I mean, the first Zelda game will just start you off at the first screen or at a dungeon entrance if you die, depending on how you choose to continue. Whereas, Zelda 2 will just eat any and all experience points that you've gained toward your next level, should you deplete your lives. This seems like a fair and balanced challenge when you're below, say level 4 or so, because you can still make progress within those limited lives that you start with. The real pain begins when you need several thousand experience points to level up, and you're then forced to grind. So unless you become extremely proficient in combat, jumping, exploring, and just plain old getting lucky at certain points in the game, you're gonna feel like you're just wasting a ton of time because of this. The game essentially discounts your efforts, despite repeatedly going through the motions, which I find funny because this is, like the most blunt, raw example of grinding and gaining experience within a game. Now, sure, the game will max out your experience points at the end of each palace, but honestly, like I've said, this can actually work against you in the long run. I've always held off on setting the jewels at the end of the palaces until I'm heading into the last section of the game. That way, I can just max out my levels instead of grinding for hours on end just to get 9,000 experience points. It's like Zelda 2 wants to have elements of action and RPG, but undermines both of them at the same time somehow. It's as fascinating as it is frustrating, honestly. This leads perfectly into Upfront Difficulty Curve. It's Death Mountain! Everything I just said before is going to apply to Death Mountain, if not tenfold. The game throws arguably the biggest, most steepest difficulty curve at the player about 20 or so minutes in. This section can be absolutely unforgiving to new players, and it still gives veterans like myself a hard time to this day. If you're not leveled properly, and you're not proficient in combat, this section is just going to wreck you, over and over. The enemies here are a huge increase in difficulty and power, and most new players are going to eat dozens and dozens of game overs here, so get used to seeing this screen. What's even worse is you'll most likely get caught in a grind loop trying to level up. Nothing in this game is more frustrating than being a few hundred experience points short and then losing your last life. Classic Cryptic Nintendo nonsense. Oh boy, is this game packed to the gills with incredibly difficult sections, of which your only hints towards overcoming are vague clues from townspeople and other NPCs. For example, look at this. You have to talk to this Choo-Choo 4 times in a row to get him to spill the tip that there's something in the woods north of the river town. Okay, cool, some information. Now, even when you've played this game a million times like myself, and you know exactly what he's talking about here, it's still tricky to find. Now, I know it's in the same spot every time I play the game, but I swear Bagu's trolling me and moving his house around. Also, take this section for example. You're just supposed to somehow know to play the flute right here so that the next palace appears. What? And then also in a similar vein, you see this dead end right here? Yeah, you're just supposed to use the spell right here, so another palace appears. Again. What? Here's one more. This one might be my favorite. There's a mirror hidden underneath this table that you have to push down and B to discover. You also need this mirror in order to continue your quest. I could go on here. And the bug. Now, Zelda 2 features some minor glitches and bugs, like enemies looking like they're spawning out of the floor, and being able to abuse spells while your magic meter is refilling. I want to focus, however, on the Death Mountain skip glitch. It's exactly what it sounds like. Not that skipping this nightmare of a part is going to do you any good and make the game any easier in the long run, but here it is anyway. So you're going to head to Raru Town, and you're going to speak with the woman in the red dress who usually heals Link's health. You have to have her positioned facing in front of the window, then let her turn around and talk to her for a second time in front of the door. If you did the sequence of actions correctly, she'll start walking up into space. Now, you need to press up on the controller, and you'll be taken to this other town. Simply run to the right, leave the town, and boom, you're now out by the king's tomb. Pretty neat, huh? Final verdict. Zelda 2 is a game that has tons of potential, but as I said before, any upside is immediately squandered and limited by the incorporation of a live system. This is not learning through perseverance and challenge, this is just poor game design in my honest personal opinion and experience. Now, if you personally enjoy this element, that's awesome. I just don't. I can't get into it. And I know many, many others that feel the same way. Now, I'm going to say this as someone that's loved the Zelda series since the days of A Link to the Past, and as someone that's also both played and beaten Zelda 2 dozens and dozens of times since childhood. I also managed to do this without a guide, before the internet, before walkthrough videos, emulations, save states, any of that. With all of that said, I still don't really enjoy it as much as I truly want to. I know that might sound weird, but it's almost like the idea of this game is amazing. It's just the execution, for me personally, I just feel it falls so far from what it could have been. Even as someone that knows how to overcome all the downsides of this game, like knowing exactly where Bagu's cabin is, or how to deal with the multitude of illusory dead ends, this game just doesn't hold up for me. The mark of a good game for me personally is one that pulls you back in again and again, despite knowing where everything is and how to complete it. The original Zelda does that for me. A Link to the Past most certainly does that for me. Most of the Zelda titles do that for me. Zelda 2, however, it just doesn't. It's also not because this is an old NES game either. I still play the first Zelda all the way through several times a year, and I still love it just as much, if not more, than when I did when I first played it. Some people feel the exact opposite and claim Zelda 2 is their favorite in the series, and even their favorite NES game. The very things that I labeled downsides might be their favorite parts of the game. Now, I just want to end this with what I think is an important point that often gets glossed over. A game can be bad, and you can still enjoy it. I don't want any of my negative experiences with the game to influence you too much. Give it a try for yourself if you haven't. The game can be bad, and you can still enjoy it. How you enjoy games is a personal experience. I fully believe this. I mean, I personally enjoy Friday the 13th for the NES, so what the hell do I know, right? But enough of what I think. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with us here on Zelda 2? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, if you liked what you saw here, give this a thumbs up, share this with someone you think may also enjoy it, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. As always, we appreciate your time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.